Hey everyone, it's me, Jeremy. You know who's taking me off? Butch Hartman. So for those who are not in the know and such, let me put you in the know and such. Elmer Earl Butch Hartman IV, or just Butch Hartman, is an animator, producer, director, writer, and sometimes voice actor who's probably best known for creating the Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom. He was a big force at Nickelodeon, working there from 2001 to 2018, and within that time, he created two other shows for the network, those being Tough Puppy and Bunsen is a Beast. Don't remember the latter? That's because it only lasted one season before Hartman left Nickelodeon, and I bet at least 95% of you forgot it even existed. Now, on top of that, he also did some work on stuff like An American Tail, Pocahontas, Tom and Jerry Kids, Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo, and even did voices for Family Guy. So, needless to say, Butch Hartman is kind of a big deal. Emphasis on kinda. Well, minus Dougal, but that was the fault of someone I won't show here, not Butch himself. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, well, this guy seems to have some pretty big achievements under his belt. What is the problem then? Well, that brings us into our next segment. The problem with Butch started with YouTube. No, not YouTube itself, but rather when he joined YouTube. Now, look, if a celebrity wants to have a YouTube channel, they can do so as they please. Whether it be Seth MacFarlane doing Mystery Science Theater 3000-esque riffs as Stewie and Brian while watching Batman and Robin, or Harrison Ford flying his planes and playing games like Tomb Raider and Full Throttle. But usually when a celebrity sets up a YouTube account, or any social media account for that matter, they mostly use it to stroke their ego and brag about how great they are. And Butch Hartman is no exception to this rule. Throughout 2017, he spent most of his time bragging about how he created our childhoods, which is only half true, and how he managed to get the Fairly OddParents on Nickelodeon, and so on, and so on. And needless to say, it got a little faster than a block of ice melting in the Sahara Desert. While there would occasionally be an interesting behind-the-scenes fact for certain shows, and even some things that nearly happened but didn't for some reason, it was all the Butch show and him saying, "I'm so great and here's why," and holy hell did it get annoying. But this was fairly minor, and unless you got extremely pissed at his bragging, you could just ignore it and move on with your life. Maybe go have a corn dog with an order of fries and a large Pepsi. Then 2018 decided, let's have something occur to get people's attention. With the first being that Butch was exiting Nickelodeon after 17 years with the company, which, whatever, people leave all the time, so that's nothing new. But the other was something that would incur the wrath of 1,000 men on the internet and enough backlash to make the Paul brothers realize they should be more like Aaron Paul and Tom Hanks. This was the announcement of Oaxis, a streaming service Butch was conceiving as a family-friendly alternative to other streaming services and television as a whole. First off, that idea is a moot point because the idea of a family-friendly streaming service has no weight to it, as between Netflix Kids and Disney Plus, which is mostly kid-friendly content, at least for the time being, it pretty much makes Oaxis pretty much useless. Second, there are already alternatives to television. They're called Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Apple TV, and even those free services that have advertisements like Pluto TV or Peacock. Not to mention, if you have an Amazon Prime account, which I'm pretty sure most of you do because getting stuff a day or two after ordering it is awesome and convenient, you can watch certain movies and shows for free with or without ads. Meaning if you still have cable or satellite television and mostly use Amazon Prime just to get that new bookshelf the day after you bought it, you still have the option to watch the shows and films if you absolutely want to, whether they were exclusive or not. Which also makes Oaxis an irrelevant piece of junk that you will most likely be shut down before you can even say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And to add salt onto the wound, it was revealed that it was almost intended to be one of those more Christian programs, one of more Christian-themed programming. Something that was never shown on the Kickstarter page for Oaxis, almost as if to convert them into such. Look, I get that Butch was made a Christian. I have no problem with that. Or any of those who are religious. Neither does Austin. But that is some Marshall Applewhite level craziness there. So it was clear that there would be backlash. And sure enough, backlash was inevitable. As the likes of L.S. Mark, Pie Guys Rules, Saber Spark, your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, your Uncle Rich, your Aunt Julie, Gabe Newell, Bill Gates, Phil Spencer, George Lucas, Bernie Sanders, and Joe Biden have called him out. Hell, if you look up Butch Hartman rant on YouTube, you will find a list so long it would make the runtime of The Godfather Part 2 look like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and you'll be drunk after seeing the results, while I'll have enough cash to build a time machine, go back in time, and grab several retro video games before they go up in price. So you'd think that with all this backlash and criticism, that Butch probably would maybe, I don't know, address these criticisms with quiet dignity and grace, and maybe clarify a couple things, maybe not be an entitled dickhead about it, right? In another universe? Yeah, probably. But you couldn't be more wrong even if you got an A+ in your book report on Blood Meridian. Rather than take it like a man, Bush decided to do one thing that most morons do when they don't want something to gain exposure. He copyright striked any videos criticizing him or Oaxis in order to try and sweep it under the rug. In other words, he basically tried the Streisand effect, which for those unaware, is basically suing someone in order to hide any evidence of something happening, and the whole thing originated with Barbra Streisand, whose house was photographed, and she tried to sue the people who took the photograph, and soon the image went viral, thus coining the phrase the Streisand effect. And if you're one of those people that does not know who Barbra Streisand even is, go watch Funny Girl, The Way We Were, What's Up Doc, Yentl, and The Prince of Tides, then come back. So, needless to say, this gained even more criticism, much like what happened with The Verge in 2018 with that infamous PC build. Eventually, Butch did address concerns by saying that though religion would still be a part of his life, Oaxis would still not be surrendered around it, but all of this definitely left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, not to mention, because of certain delays, people have deemed him a con man. Oh, but don't fret, because it gets even worse. In that there's the statements he made about Mary Kay Bergman, who tragically took her own life in 1999. There's his butchering of certain characters by transferring them into his own art style, which looks like drug-infused oversimplifications of more complex art styles. And not to mention the plagiarized picture of Mikasa Ackerman from another picture conceived in 2018. But what really grinds both mine and Austin's gears is what he said about curing autism as a part of his program that he and his wife run. That is not only incredibly stupid, but also offensive and just downright insulting that someone would just go out and say something like that. Look, if Christianity helps those who are autistic, good on you. That's your thing. But when you claim that you can cure it outright, that's just wrong. Plus, if the program can cure cancer, why can't it cure someone who just suffered a stroke and can't use the right side of their body? And then there's the case of Robert Daniel Orpia, aka Kuro the Artist, an artist who was hired by Butch to draw art for his scrap imagination project, but when things fell through, Kuro demanded full payment, but Butch refused, despite being in his contract. This nearly led Kuro to attempting to sue Butch for failing to pay him, only for Butch to cave in and pay him, but only through his Noog network service, rather than, the genuine way by doing it yourself. This paints Butch not only as an asshole and a man-child who can't handle criticism, but also a con artist who swindled a man out of his money, despite Kuro being a fan of Hartman. In fact, same goes for Oaxis as a whole, as just looking at the service itself is about as sufficient as having one mini powdered donut when you want at least 12 more, meaning those who were expecting a good product were tricked into giving their money to something as mediocre as Oaxis and someone as douchey as Butch Hartman. And that, my friends, is Butch Hartman in a nutshell. He may not be as evil as John Cristofalusi, but compared to most people, Butch Hartman is the Randy Pitchford of the cartoon industry. They're both jerks, they're both egotistical narcissists, they're both con artists that cheated people out of their money, and they both have projects that never came through and are mildly disappointing. Disappointing, I should say. So, the only thing missing from it all is a USB stick full of porn, and Butch could almost be considered Randy Pitchford's long-lost brother. Say, they're not good dudes. They may have done some things good, but they are not nice. And with that, this has been my rant, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to do more of these in the future whenever I decide to, or whenever Austin decides to, which will probably be in the future sometime soon. So, with that, my name's Jeremy, and I'm here to remind you that just because it smells like a turd, looks like a turd, and feels like a turd, doesn't mean it will give you your hair back. You're gonna have to try and rub some butter on it in order to make it work. So, with that, I'll catch you on the rebound. So with that, sayonara. Note to self, do the outro better.